Hello, friends. Welcome to Akulmach Live. I am your host, Chandrakant, and today we are discussing about the budget. As we speak today, the budget is being presented by the finance minister in the parliament, and only the higher level guidelines are being presented. And therefore, I thought it is most appropriate for me to bring the five desires that I have from this budget. Now, these five desires that I have from the budget is not entirely dependent on my own personal requirements. It's basically what I feel that budget should look like from a holistic point of view, from the India point of view. All right, so let's discuss about these five things which I will discuss with you openly. The first item on the table is the formalizing the informal workforce. You see, what is happening is that the workforce is sort of becoming very informal, very contractual, and which is a reality. We know that the workforce is, working from home. Most of the work is happening from home. Even for large companies, the people prefer to work from home. So this whole work culture is taking a big swing. However, there are no regulations, there are no codifications. So my expectation is that if the informal workforce can be formalized in some way, can we get the UNESCO code assigned to various services? I'm not saying that we should actually make it strict. That is the last thing that I would like to have. But if these services that the people in India are providing, and if they are codified, then there could be a global market because those codes will be UNESCO codes, and then you can offer those services anywhere in the world, and it will be a lot easier for people to sell their services while working from home in an informal sector, informal way, and still make money, still make livelihood. So I think this is something which I thought this new budget must address, because the informal workforce has become substantially large, bringing a lot of revenue. I mean, if you look at the content space also, which is completely informal, and it is becoming a big boom in India. A lot of people are making content, and therefore this is one area which this budget must look at. Now let's move on to the next one. From my point of view, electric vehicles. Now electric vehicles can be very good, and they can be less polluting. However, there are two issues with electric vehicle. One is that the base industry of producing electric vehicle are very polluting, especially if we look at the battery industry is extremely polluting, and in fact they actually spoil the environment so much so that even if you run a petrol car, that damage will not be equal to what the lithium ion battery production company can do to the environment. So this is something which is a chronic issue, and because of that, most of the governments are not investing big time in electric vehicles. However, if there is no use of battery, then you can have the overline electric line, just like in the case of trains. Then then there is no battery. Directly electricity is fed into the engine of the electric trains, and then they run without any pollution. So I think there are two issues: how the government will circumnavigate the issue of the pollution which the EV industry create for the environment, because ultimately why we are going to EV is simply because we want to save the environment. However, if the EV industry itself, the cars and the entire battery, etc., all of this, if it creates a bigger mess, then why we should actually adopt it? So I think that is one of the reasons that many governments are not moving at the speed at which they should move ahead, right? But they are also doing something superficial. They are saying that, okay, now let's go ahead and let's everyone switch to EV. So that is something which needs to be addressed. So if they have something which they want to talk about, it will be very appreciable. Second point when it comes to EV is that government has to do walk the talk. Government is running a lot of vehicles, especially the freight trains, and the freight trains are running from length and breadth of India, carrying all kinds of goods from one corner of India to other corner of India. So they can actually electrify all the freight rate. Now, when the government do things, they have to make regulations. So in this budget, the expectation would be that the government must come out with some sort of a framework for themselves, for the Indian railways, or any trucking, if there are any electric lanes that will be developed on the roadside, which will allow electric trucks to run, take the electricity from the overhead cable and run. So basically, when it comes to freight movement, this budget must talk about some sort of regulation, mandating with themselves first that by such and such date they will electrify every freight movement in India, because freight movement is a major contributor to the pollution in India. So I think that is the point number 2. More clarity on the electric vehicle segment. Number 3 is the startup ecosystem. Startups. We know that India is one of the leading country today, and there are a lot of startups in India which are doing pretty well. So many startups are doing pretty well. However, the competition is also global. There are a lot of startup hubs. Israel could be considered one. The Northwest area and also Silicon Valley in US can be considered as a good startup hubs. Also, there are a lot of countries like Vietnam, Eastern European countries, and so on and so forth. So there is, and of course, China. How can we forget China? So China is also coming up very rapidly into the startup foray. So if we need to basically make sure that the new ideas come up and things like that, then we have to create a much vibrant ecosystem for promoting startups. Right now, the clarity is not there, because if you're a startup registered as a startup, and if you go to the bank will treat you like established business. They will ask all 3 years of documentation, blah, 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 all the KYC they will have to do. So that is a showstopper. I mean, the startup will not be able to proceed further if they are put in the same bracket as established business, because startup do not have anything to showcase, right? They will have a lot of money, that's it, but they will not get any benefit from the bank in terms of advances and stuff like that. I mean, they get some support, but not to the extent what is expected from a startup to promote the startup ecosystem. So the third expectation that I like to see from this budget is some sort of clarity on what benefits startups will get, so that more and more entrepreneurs can join this and create startup ecosystem, bring new ideas. Because if there are no ideas coming up, then obviously we will lose out in next 5 years, 10 years to the global competition. So I think this is very, very important to create a much lucrative startup ecosystem, and also do not allow foreign startups to establish on Indian soil. So I think there has to be some clarity there, because you have created the startup ecosystem, but then other finance ministry and other entities do not talk to each other. They do not have a very cohesive ecosystem among all departments, all areas of the government. So I think that is one thing which I will personally like to see the clarity in this budget. Moving on to the fourth point, which I want to see being discussed in Parliament during this budget session, and that is the income tax reforms. Income tax is the chronic area. I know there are a lot of electorate pressure. I mean, of course, we have just crossed the general election, and government has come back into the seat, and now they are basically discussing the budget. However, the income tax, the way we do income tax is absolutely not clear at all. The way we do income tax is not at all beneficial to the common man. Let's look at the income tax paying. There are basically the middle class which pays the maximum amount of income tax. If you're really super rich, high net worth individual, you put all the expenses onto the company, and then company will pay income tax, or company will show investment, so they can hide under this process. If you are a low income group, anyway you don't pay any tax. So all the tax that we talk about today comes onto the middle class. And if you look at the amount of tax that you're paying today, is the income tax. And when you get that income after deduction as source, you bring that money home in your account and then you start buying things in the market, then you pay GST. So essentially, how much tax you are paying as a common man is almost 60%. So it looks like on the paper that you are making 100 rupees, but then moment you get 100 rupees, the same very second, 60 is going back to the government. So I think this is not a great model, especially for the middle class, and especially the middle class is so large in India. I think bigger reforms is needed. Like GST was a great reform. Therefore, income tax reform is also needed. Maybe making the percentage and minimum income up and down is not going to cut the ice. In my opinion, there has to be complete change in which we actually calculate our tax and we pay. Maybe it's transaction based, maybe it's different, so that the money remains in your pocket. Money is not sent back. I mean, what's the fun in making 100 rupees and then paying the same moment, paying back 60 rupees back to the government? There is no fun. And all the expenses we'll have to take care. And that is why I will talk about the next point, which is related to education. You see, you are making 100 rupees, you're paying back to the government 60 rupees for whatever commodities you're buying, including services like education for your children. Education is so expensive. It's very, very expensive. I think government must look into this aspect where the education institutes are not able to reduce their fee structure simply because on one side government says that NCERT book has been standardized, and as long as the education institutes offer NCERT, they will have to follow the regulator. And the whole point is that since there is the regulator, there are lots of licenses that the school will have to follow. There are a lot of processes, checks and balances. It takes a couple of years to establish a school. It is not easy to establish a school. So therefore, when the schools start as a business, they want to recover whatever they have spent the money in procuring that license from the government. So it's like I'm not saying that the school should be at a loss. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that whatever government says that, hey, we have standardized the NCERT books and it's freely available on this portal on the NCERT. Similarly, there is a UGC, which is the regulator for the university. And so basically, people who want to start education institute, they will have to go through the grind, which takes at least half a decade to establish something and a lot of fund. And once they invest so much money or sink so much money, they will have to recover it in next a couple of years. And therefore, the fee structure in India is very, very high. So if you basically go back to the tax part of it, you make 100 rupees, you pay 60 rupees. After that, you are left only with 40. And then you have to pay very high fee for your children. How much money you are left with in the end? Education cost is one of the major costs for the parent in India. So I think there has to be something done. It's nothing has been done in the last 10 years. Something is expected from the government to create something, because education is a fundamental right. Everybody has a right to educate themselves, their children. So when the fee structure, the cost of education is so high, how they will educate themselves, right? So I think it's a catch-22. Government has to create some sort of, release the license Raj and allow education institutes to come up so that proper education can be provided at an adequate cost. At the same time, number two, very, very big issue for future of India is the skills. The education institutes have already spent so much in procuring the land, in building, in all their sales activity, and also the license they have paid to the government, and they have waited for license to be given for a couple of years. It takes, if you go through the process of getting a small school setup, a primary school setup, it is at least 2 to 3 years time it takes. The process itself is so tough. So what's the point in saying that, hey, we have standardized free books, NCERT books, and they are available on this portal, when in reality, the schools will have to you will have to pay the fee of the school. So it doesn't make any difference. So now the schools are not able to shift gear because they have to follow the NCERT guidelines or UGC guidelines. At the same time, whatever skills they are imparting are not relevant in the field. So if you are educated in a school or a university, those skills will not be applicable, and therefore, since those skills are not applicable, no business will like to hire those people who are passing out. So the education institutes are not moving fast enough along with how the industry is moving. So this is very important. I like to see in this budget some sort of reform, some sort of guidelines, some sort of some education plan being offered, and providing some freebies here and there will not cut the ice. It is not going to help anybody. So there has to be some very, very serious education based reform is required, so that more and more people who are knowledgeable can provide skills quicker and faster at a lower cost to the future generation. So these are the 5 points I thought I will bring as a layman. What are my expectations from this budget, which is already tabled in the parliament and being discussed starting from today. Friends, I like to know what you feel. What is your opinion? Do you have any expectations? I would like to know from you. So friends, thank you so much for watching me live, and I will catch you again in the next one. Bye for now.